From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. I am Ben Hall. Tonight we're talking all about Metro schools, specifically some of Metro's priority schools, those on the low-performing list. What is being done to turn them around? But we'll take any question you have about Metro schools. Happy to have with us two people who can answer your questions. We have Dr. Tony Majors, Metro Public Schools over Student Services. That includes discipline and all manner of things. Thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here.
And Dr. Alan Coverstone. Works with turnaround schools, charter schools. Thank you also for being here.
A pleasure.
So, big picture, Metro schools are out at the end of this week. Is that right?
Yeah.
What's the big picture here?
This Friday, all Metro schools will be our last day for this semester, and it'll be a half day, so all schools will dismiss early.
And Alan, a lot being done when we're talking about these turnaround schools. 15 low-performing schools, 6 last year, 15 this year. Where do we stand? What can you tell us about what's happening right now?
Well, we're right in the middle of a major effort to recruit 10 really strong turnaround principals with some turnaround experience. It's a nationwide search. We're looking inside the district and out. Leadership in a turnaround environment is probably the most important, or at least the biggest variable that you can bring to bear on the situation. And so we're putting a lot of time and attention into that. At the same time, we're trying to recruit 100 outstanding teachers with some turnaround school experience as well, so that they can form support teams with the principals in those buildings. And then we're digging as deep as we can into all the data that's available on the schools, so that we know all the circumstances that the students face, and so that we understand what the teachers are dealing with and what they can do, what they need to do, and so that we can build individualized plans for each of those schools. As you dig into that data, and it makes sense that you would do that, what are you finding that maybe surprises you, or is an area that you think needs a great deal of attention that that maybe not everyone knows? I mean, so we know, okay, their test scores were low, but what are some of the root things you're finding as you drill down into the schools themselves? Well, I think Tony can talk about that as well as, or better than anybody, but you're finding higher than average rates of chronic underattendance, chronic absenteeism. You're finding high rates of student mobility. You're finding high rates of truancy in those schools. And, it's an axiom that if you're not in school, you can't learn. And so identifying ways to engage families, to engage students, and to engage community supports that are available is something that's really an important priority, and something that Tony really helps us to lead on.
Yeah, and when we really started looking at each of our priority schools, what we found was that each of our priority schools exceeded the district average for students that are chronically absent. And that means students that miss school for any reason, excused, unexcused, or any type of disciplinary removal. At the same time, we saw that the suspension rates were somewhat higher than district average in some of our priority schools. So when we look at the turnaround strategies for each of our schools, we want to make sure that we are attentive to any disciplinary practices, both school-wide and individual classroom. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we're looking at the needs of the individual students. As Dr. Register conducted his community meetings at each of the priority schools, a common theme that we heard from both teachers and community members and parents was that we need to be more attentive to the non-instructional needs of our children. So everything that Alan and Jay and Leadership and Learning are doing to improve the school's academic performance, we are equally working just as hard to address the socio-emotional learning needs of each of our children.
So you drill down even further. Why are they more absent? Why is there this chronic absenteeism in these schools? What can you attribute that to? You
cannot attribute it to any one thing. For some, it's excused absences. For some, it's unexcused absences. For some, it's illness. We know that asthma has a high impact for a lot of our children. So in some situations, it's health issues. In some situations, it's transportation, and the parents just aren't getting the children to school. So we have to look at it from a holistic approach of, regardless of the reason they're missing school, we have to find a way to make sure they're in school consistently, not missing more than 10% of the instructional days, and help families overcome whatever barriers that they're facing that are preventing them from getting to school.
And then you get into the issue of charter schools. How many of these may become charter schools? I mean, what is your vision? And right now, I'm focusing just on these priority schools. And of course, as you call in, you can broaden the focus. But with these priority schools, what is your your thought about the number of priority schools. We'll get into state takeover in a moment, but what about charter schools?
Well, charter schools is just one way of repurposing schools that are in priority status. So, for example, one of the schools on the list, Ross Elementary, was repurposed as a pre-K center. So it's a model pre-K center operating this year. It's no longer a priority school. It has been retrofitted. It's completely outfitted top to bottom with the activities and the materials that are needed for it to become a model pre-K center, and it's drawing in people who are working to make that an excellent opportunity for kids. And so that's one way that you can sort of reuse a school or do it differently. When it comes to charter schools, what we're trying to do there is we're trying to take the same students who've been in the school and change the management, add some flexibility, change the way that the instructional day is organized, change the supports and connections so that you can get better results as a result of their engagement with this new organization and this new leadership or this new management structure. As far as the capacity or as far as what we're after here, we have only approved one conversion charter, and that's the charter school at Kirkpatrick that is proposed to be at Kirkpatrick, and that school would be our effort to address priority schools using charter schools. The state's Achievement School District has also selected one of the priority schools, which it has the right by law to do, and that's Neely's Bend Middle School, and they'll be converting that school to a charter school. But other than that, we're not anticipating any charter schools as part of this priority list. And we're going to be tackling the issues that Tony's talking about. We're going to be tackling instruction and tackling the issues that are needed to turn those schools around.
And so, all right, well then, to tackle the issue Tony's talking about, how do you do that? If kids are chronically absent, and I ask why, and you said it's all manner of things. How do we tackle that first?
Well, we tackle that from multiple angles. So internally, of course, my department, we have social workers and behavior specialists and psychologists and others who work with the schools and school teams to identify students in need of services. But this is one of the things that we're seeing as we've worked hard with our priority schools, is that it's a bigger call, it's a bigger need. So we are also working with a lot of our community-based agencies and nonprofits through what we call Community Achieves. It is our strategy to engage the community using the community schools model to provide direct services in our schools. So we've been in conversations with the majority of our nonprofits here in the city, and we're going to continue to work with those that we've not reached that can provide direct services in our schools. So it's a mix. We have internal MNPS staff that are already working towards meeting the needs of students, and then we're reaching out to our community partners to be more actively engaged in a systemic way, not just showing up, but make sure that you're there working with specific children towards specific outcomes.
You identify the needs that are there, and these schools become centers for the community to obtain some of these services. Well,
the community schools model is designed for schools to serve as the hub of services in the community. So through our Community Achieves work, we have schools that we work going through the process of becoming full service community schools, and then there's others that will just be using the community schools framework to identify need, identify partners, and then utilize them in their turnaround strategies.
And you mentioned new principles. When will they be in place? And it's interesting to me that you're opening it up to a national search. Generally it seems like, and I know that happens, but a lot of times also you move principals from school to school and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. When do you think new principals will be in place, and what are you finding in this national search? Explain that more.
Well, the first thing is there's a difference in turning around a school, making it a place that everybody wants to be, being able to work with the community agencies, but also make the instruction in the classrooms more engaging so that students really want to come back to the school. There's just a difference in taking a school that has struggled and turning it around versus just running a school. And it's, one's maybe not harder than the other, but they're very different in terms of skills. So we're really trying to hone in on the particular skills that research shows are important to turning around schools and leading the turnaround efforts in schools. And so as we go search, that's a thin slice. There just aren't that many people who have actually done that work, and we're really looking for the people who have and trying to make sure that they're in the pool. That's why you want to go national in trying to draw as many of those people with that experience as possible.
And where do you stand on that, and when do you think you'll be completed with it?
So the recruitment effort is well underway, and we are aiming for interviews in early January, so that by the time we get to February, we hope to know what our pool is looking like and know what we have available to deploy in the schools, and we'll begin to be able to make some decisions about which schools will get new leaders at that time.
All right, let's take a call here before we go to break. David, hello.
Yeah, gentlemen, good evening. I have a complaint about the school board. I think the worst thing that ever happened to a neighborhood high school is the biggest problem was a metro school board. Because at one time you had Donaldson, you had Madison, you had DuPont. You had, in my opinion, if Goldsboro had been taken care of the way it was supposed to have been, it would still be here. I went to DuPont where our schools got burned down. Half of us went to McGavock, half of us went to Hunters Lane. We get a new school built out in Hermitage and then they close it. I think the worst thing that ever happened to those schools was a Metro School Board because, nobody ever said a reason why, when DuPont was built out in Hermitage, nobody ever said a reason why that it had to be closed down. And now every town, when they think about rebuilding the school out there, there's always an excuse. And I'm kind of wondering why. Hey, y'all have a great evening.
Okay. He's talking about several issues there, school consolidation, that kind of thing. What comment do you want to give?
Well, I think it'd be really hard for us to speak to the plans or what took place several years ago. But I think it's also about looking at capacity. At that time, where was the new construction needed? I do know that there have been conversation about future plans regarding school expansions here in the city. And of course, our school board and our operations and planning departments will have those conversations moving forward. In regards to the school board, I think, as a metropolitan government, and having an elected school board, they have selected a policy governance model, and that is the model that's been adopted for our school system. And I just think, our elected school boards are representative of their communities and are charged with helping to guide the operation of the school system. So that's the model that we have here in Nashville, and I think we just have to support it to the best of our ability and do the best we can.
And Alan, I think, and we'll take a break and discuss this afterward, he gets into, and we may get other calls about this, neighborhood schools. Right. People love the idea of neighborhood schools. People also love the idea of diversity. Sometimes you don't have both. Right. It's a difficult thing to have both, and both are important and have value. But why don't we'll talk about that when we come back. How do we bridge that? We'll take a break. If you want to call, there's a number, 737+, 737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.